but we're moving to the next stage of designing programs that will maintain the economies and be ready as a recovery takes hold, we hope in the second half of 2020.
On Expert Answers today, we get the view from the top. David Maalpass, the president of the World Bank Group, gives us his thoughts on the coronavirus response and lays out his vision for the road to recovery, including the risks and opportunities that developing countries face as they work to recover from the pandemic. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, happy to be on. It's a good topic.
Well, sir, let's just jump right into it. Much of the world's attention so far has rightly been focused on the health crisis and the immediate response to that. But as countries begin to relax some of those restrictions, those lockdowns, a lot of the focus is going to be turning towards rebuilding and recovery. What will be your priorities and the focus areas for the World Bank Group as we move forward here?
It'll be very important that the private sector be maintained, the government sectors be improved, and also that we have a matching of where the World Bank can help countries and where they can actually make progress. So there's this combination of available resources and things that the countries want to do. We want to be responsive to the country's needs, but also to make as much progress as we can.
You know, I know you believe that the developing countries will be hardest hit by the downturn that is likely to result from the pandemic. Help me and the audience understand this a little bit further. Why do you think they are particularly vulnerable in this period ahead?
It's a double impact. They're vulnerable to the pandemic, to COVID-19 itself, and people are dying in the countries. But then this added problem is they just don't have the resources and the capacity in order to protect their economies. So what we are trying to do is create programs that are as helpful as possible to the countries. And this means tailoring the programs to different countries. So what I'm conveying is there needs to be variation across countries to meet the needs, the urgent needs that people are having as the world goes into this deep recession.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, it's a lot of looking at the individual needs of those countries and tailoring the response for those countries to make sure they're getting an effective response that they need.
That's exactly right. One of the problems that poor countries have is just being cut off. That people live in rural areas, they don't have broadband. They in some cases, many cases, don't have electricity or water that's clean enough to drink. And so as we look to the other side of this, I think there's a way to make progress on advancing the digital services that people have available so they can get access to information. So that's something that we have. We're making available programs that will help people get access to education or to skills that will help them when there's a recovery.
And on a more sort of abstract kind of overview, economic level, my understanding is that a faster recovery will require a return to growth. What are some of the key areas for the bank and your priorities for supporting and promoting that return to growth?
One big problem is countries have been cut off from access to global financial markets. And so there's been a sudden change in their ability to roll over their debt, borrow their debt. So so we're doing multiple things in that area. So that's one set of tasks. And then the other set of tasks is to maintain an economy so that it's ready to have growth. IFC, the International Finance Corporation, has been instrumental in creating trade finance, where they lend companies money for a very short period of time to finance imports. And that program already has had $1.4 billion of involvement, of engagement with countries in order to maintain the flow of goods into and out of poor countries. So to put it in perspective, we started with the healthcare crisis. That was 100 programs starting in mid-March that we were able to set up programs in 100 different countries that would address the immediate health crisis and provide things like personal protective equipment. But now we're implementing that, and it's a big challenge. It involves a lot of people at the bank, but we're moving to the next stage of designing programs that will maintain the economies and be ready as a recovery takes hold, we hope in the second half of 2020.
I know another big priority of yours is sustainable use of debt. I've heard in the past about debt transparency and other responsible uses of debt. The World Bank, has warned about the level of debt that some of the poorest, some of the developing countries are holding even before this crisis began. My question for you is has this crisis made that situation worse? Has the coronavirus pandemic increased the threat of unsustainable debt?
One problem is that the governments of developing countries are seeing their revenues go down a lot. That's their tax revenues and their revenues from tariffs, from trade, for example. And so what that means is whatever level of debt they had prior to the crisis is more burdensome. So we're addressing that by providing more resources, by the moratorium on payments that we talked about earlier. The G20 countries, the biggest countries, have been generous in saying that the poorest countries don't need to pay them back for their official debt. That saves money for the developing country, but also means that new investments have some breathing room in order to grow going forward. Another part of this is the transparency of both the debt and the investment that countries make. I'll phrase it as a problem, but I think we're making progress. The problem is, when governments enter into contracts that are not transparent, it's hard to know whether they've been getting a good deal, whether it's going to work for the people of the country. So it's a better system to have transparency.
As we wrap up here, looking for a silver lining, a lot of people look at the pandemic and the crisis and the recovery that will come as an opportunity to quote unquote build back better. And I think what they mean by that is that the decisions and the investments that countries make now and will make here in the short term could result in a more resilient and sustainable sort of foundation that will help those countries sort of hold off future crises or protect themselves from future crises. Where do you and the bank see some opportunities to that end?
This is my favorite topic. So I want to mention the opportunity, or as countries think about how to build back, having a lower carbon footprint is an opportunity. Oil prices are low now. It's a chance for people to change their systems and improve their systems so that they work better in the future. So I don't want to leave us on a down note, but I think we have to recognize the reality that with the world entering a severe recession, there's urgency in these tasks that I've talked about because the poverty levels are rising. It's the first time since 1998, that was the Asian crisis, the first time now, again, that the poverty levels are going up instead of down, and that has severe consequences. So that drives the World Bank forward, and I hope drives the developing countries forward to create a better, stronger environment.
David, thank you so much for taking the time today.
And thank you. Good to talk with you.
A huge thanks to David Malpass for his time. If you want to see a longer version of this interview, head on over to live.worldbank.org. You can also listen to it. Just search for the World Bank's Development Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or many other platforms. In the meantime, tell us what you thought. Email us at expertanswers@worldbank.org. Until next time, goodbye.